2 bullets sat in a steel tray. The third one was still inside his chest, millimeters from his heart. An Army general lay split open on the table, and the best surgeon in Washington, D.C. had just frozen. His hands wouldn't move. That's when a rookie nurse, 6 months on the job, stepped forward and said 3 words that changed everything. "I can do it." Nobody believed her. 30 minutes later, 2 Navy helicopters landed on the hospital roof, and the truth about that nurse nearly brought the United States military to its knees. St. Lawrence Memorial Hospital, Washington, D.C., 12:31 p.m. Before we begin, take 2 seconds. Subscribe, follow this story to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The radio had been quiet all morning, the kind of quiet that made veteran nurses nervous and rookies grateful. St. Lawrence Memorial Hospital sat 6 miles from the Capitol building, close enough to catch the overflow when the city bled, far enough to pretend it was just another hospital. Elena Cole was restocking a crash cart when the first call came through. Active shooter, Fort McNair, award ceremony, multiple casualties inbound, ETA 4 minutes. She stopped. Her hands didn't shake. They should have. 6 months in this emergency room, and the worst she'd handled was a car accident on the Beltway and a construction worker who'd fallen 3 stories. This was different. She could hear it in the dispatcher's voice, the kind of control that only comes when someone is fighting not to scream. Around her, the ER tightened like a fist. Curtains snapped open, trays slammed into position. Dr. Ryan Calloway, the lead trauma surgeon, came through the double doors already gloving up, jaw set, eyes sharp. "How many?" he asked. "At least 3 incoming, 1 critical." "Bay 1, clear it, now." Elena moved without being told. She stripped the bay, prepped the lines, checked the monitors. Her motions were efficient. Too efficient, some might say, for a nurse who'd only been here half a year. But no one was watching her. Not yet. The ambulance bay doors blew open 3 minutes and 40 seconds later. The gurney came in fast. 2 paramedics, both pale, both shouting. On the stretcher lay a man in dress blues, soaked so dark with blood they looked black. His medals had been cut away, tossed in a bag that hung from the rail like an afterthought. A ribbon was still pinned to what remained of his jacket. "General Marcus Holt," the lead paramedic called out. 58 years old, 3 GSWs to the chest, 2 through and through, 1 lodged. Pulse thready, BP crashing. "He coded once in the bus. We got him back." "He coded?" Calloway said sharply. 30 seconds, maybe 40. "We pushed epi and shocked him once." "Once?" "That's all it took. He came back fighting." Calloway looked down at the general's face, eyes closed, jaw clenched even in unconsciousness. This was a man whose body refused to quit, even when his heart had already stopped once. "Get him on the table, now. I want blood typed and cross-matched yesterday. Someone get me imaging." The trauma bay became a machine, 12 people moving as one. Elena was among them, handing instruments before they were requested, adjusting lines without being asked, her eyes tracking 3 things at once. The first bullet came out in under 2 minutes, lodged in the trapezius muscle, deep, ugly, but clean. Calloway dropped it in the tray without ceremony. Next one. The second was shallow, caught in the chest wall, hadn't penetrated the pleural cavity. It came free with a firm extraction. More blood, quickly controlled. Calloway's hands were steady, practiced. This was what he was built for. "Vitals?" he called. "BP 80/50, pulse 112. He's holding, but barely." "He'll hold," Calloway muttered. "Get me that scan." The CT image loaded on the overhead monitor, and the room changed. Not the sound. The sound stayed the same. Monitors beeping, suction humming, ventilator cycling. What changed was the air, the energy. that invisible thing that connects every person in a trauma bay to the same unspoken truth. The third bullet sat 3 millimeters from the general's heart, not embedded deep enough to extract safely, not shallow enough to leave alone, resting against tissue so delicate that every heartbeat, every single one, pushed it a fraction closer to catastrophe. Calloway stared at the image. His hands, which hadn't trembled once in 22 years of surgery, hovered over the incision. "It's too close," the anesthesiologist said quietly. Calloway didn't respond. He repositioned, checked the angle, studied the rhythm on the cardiac monitor, repositioned again. Nobody spoke. A resident standing near the wall swallowed hard enough for everyone to hear. A nurse gripped the edge of a tray so tightly her knuckles went white. Calloway's fingers hovered, then stopped, then hovered again. He couldn't commit, and everyone in that room knew why. One wrong movement, 1 millimeter of miscalculation, and General Marcus Holt would bleed out on this table. Not from the bullet, but from the surgeon's attempt to save him. The heart would tear, the hemorrhage would be instant and unsurvivable. "Ryan," the anesthesiologist said carefully, his pressure's dropping. "We need to make a call." "I know what we need to do," Calloway snapped, but his hands still didn't move. 10 seconds passed. 20. In trauma surgery, 20 seconds is an eternity. And then a voice came from behind him. Quiet, calm, almost impossibly steady. "I can do it." Calloway didn't turn around. He didn't even register who had spoken at first. His focus was locked on that scan, on the impossible geometry of metal and tissue. "No, you can't," he said flatly. Elena didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't raise her voice or step forward dramatically. She simply moved closer to the monitor, just one step, and spoke again. "The angle of entry is 17 degrees lateral. The tissue is already reacting. You can see the edema forming on the left margin. If you go in standard, you'll hit the edema pocket and the hemorrhage will be uncontrollable. But if you rotate the approach, come in from the inferior angle between the third and fourth rib, and time the extraction to the diastolic pause, the heart will be at its smallest volume. The tissue displacement drops by nearly 40%. You have a window of 0.6 seconds on each cycle." The room went dead silent. Calloway turned, not just his head, his whole body. He looked at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. Not the scrubs, not the badge, her. Her eyes were steady. No fear, no hesitation. Her hands hung relaxed at her sides. The hands of someone who had done something like this before. Not once, many times. "That approach," Calloway said slowly, "is not in any civilian protocol." "No," Elena agreed. "That method isn't taught outside combat surgery." Elena said nothing. The silence in that room was so heavy it had weight. Every person held their breath. Every monitor seemed to beep louder. Calloway looked back at the scan, then at Elena, then at the general's chest, still open, still bleeding, still counting down. He exhaled once, long and slow. "Do it," he said, and stepped back from the table. A resident's jaw dropped. "Dr. Calloway," "I said do it." His voice left no room for argument. Elena was already moving. She washed in with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Not the careful, methodical scrub of a nursing student, but the fast, precise preparation of a field operator working against a clock that doesn't wait. She took the instruments from the tray. Her grip was perfect, not tight, not loose. The grip of someone whose hands remembered what her file said she'd never learned. She positioned herself over the general's open chest and looked at the monitor one final time. The rhythm was there, unsteady, stubborn, but alive. She counted the beats silently, mapping the window, finding the pause. "Suction ready," she said. "Ready," the resident confirmed, voice cracking slightly. "I need absolute silence for the next 90 seconds. No one speaks. No one moves. If his rhythm changes, tap my shoulder once. Don't say a word. Calloway watched her give orders to his team, and his team obeyed without question. Authority had shifted in this room, and no one could explain how or why. Elena leaned in. Her fingers found the path, the one she'd described, the one no civilian textbook contained. She traced along the tissue with an instrument so precisely it barely seemed to touch. 1 heartbeat. She waited. 2 heartbeats. She adjusted. 3, and she moved. The instrument slid between the 3rd and 4th rib exactly as she'd calculated. She followed the angles she'd described. Inferior, rotated, timed to the diastolic pause. And her hand disappeared into the wound with a confidence that made Calloway's throat tighten. The monitor dipped. Just slightly, just enough to freeze every heart in that room. Pressure, Elena said, not panicked, not even concerned. Just a word, spoken like a fact. Someone applied pressure instantly. Elena adjusted, shifted her wrist by a fraction, redirected force to a spot that looked wrong to everyone watching. The anesthesiologist opened his mouth to object, then closed it. The bleeding slowed. The monitor steadied. Elena's fingers found the bullet. She could feel it, the hard edge of metal resting against tissue that was never meant to hold it. One wrong twitch and the heart wall would tear. She didn't twitch. Pause suction, she said. The resident looked at Calloway. Calloway snapped his fingers once. Sharp, definitive. Do what she says. Suction stopped. Blood pooled for exactly 1 second, then settled. Exactly as Elena had predicted. Exactly as she'd seen it happen before, in a place with no monitors, no sterile lights, no backup. She waited, counted, felt the heartbeat through her fingertips like a drummer reading a rhythm. 1, 2, 3. On the 3rd beat, in that fraction of a second when the heart relaxed and the tissue softened, she extracted. The bullet came free with a quiet, metallic sound. It dropped into the waiting tray beside the other 2. For 3 full seconds, nobody breathed. Then the monitor caught up. The rhythm stabilized, clean, strong, steady. The frantic spikes that had dominated the screen for the past hour flattened into something beautiful, something alive. A nurse let out a sob she didn't mean to. The resident swore under his breath and turned away so no one would see his face. Calloway closed his eyes for just a moment, the kind of moment surgeons allow themselves only when death has been beaten. Elena didn't react. Her hands were already moving, closing, suturing, stabilizing. Her face showed nothing. No triumph, no relief, just focus. Vitals? She asked. The anesthesiologist checked the monitors twice before answering, as if he didn't trust what he was seeing. BP climbing, 92/60, pulse stabilizing. He's holding. Good, Elena said simply. Keep the pressors on standby. He'll dip again in about 12 minutes when the adrenaline wears off. Be ready. She said it like she was predicting the weather, like she'd watched this exact sequence play out before. Not in a textbook, but on a body she'd put back together with her bare hands in the dirt. Calloway moved into her line of sight. Where did you train? Elena's hands didn't pause. Her eyes stayed on the suture line. Somewhere mistakes don't get corrected. He stared at her for a long time, then nodded, slowly, like a man who'd just been handed an answer he wasn't ready to open. The general was alive, critical, but alive, and that should have been the end of it. A remarkable save, a rookie nurse with unusual skill, a story for the break room that would grow larger with each telling. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because outside, growing louder by the second, heavy enough to rattle the windows and vibrate through the ceiling tiles, the sound of rotor blades filled the sky. A nurse near the window squinted up. Is that? 2 Navy helicopters were descending toward the hospital roof. Fast, deliberate. their markings unmistakable even from 6 floors below. Elena's hand stopped, just for 1 second, just long enough for Calloway to notice. "You hear that?" he asked. "I hear it," she said. Her voice was calm, but something in her eyes, something deep and carefully buried, had just shifted. She finished the last suture, checked the general's rhythm one final time, and stepped back from the table. She removed her gloves, disposed of them properly, checked the chart. And then General Marcus Holt's hand twitched. His eyes fluttered open, hazy, unfocused, but aware enough to track movement. His gaze swept the room weakly, past the monitors, past the nurses, past Calloway, and landed on Elena's face. His cracked lips moved. The word that came out was barely a whisper, but in the silence of that room, it hit like a thunderclap. "Doc." Elena's breath caught. Her mask hid everything except her eyes, and in her eyes, for just one fraction of a second, something broke through. Something old, something she had spent 7 years burying. She recovered instantly. "You're safe, General," she said softly. "Try not to talk." His fingers tightened weakly around the sheet, then relaxed. His eyes closed again. Behind her, a resident leaned forward. "Did he just call you Doc? Why would he?" "He's confused," Elena said, already turning away. "Post-trauma response. It's common." It was plausible. It was clinical. It was the kind of answer that should have ended the conversation. But Calloway was watching her. And Calloway had spent 22 years reading people under pressure. He'd seen her hands. He'd heard her words. He'd watched her extract a bullet from a beating heart using a technique that existed in exactly one place on Earth, the battlefield. And now a decorated Army general had looked at this rookie nurse and called her Doc. Calloway said nothing, but his eyes followed Elena as she walked out of the trauma bay, and the question forming in his mind was the same one that was about to bring 2 Navy helicopters, an admiral, and the full weight of a classified military file crashing into this hospital. Who was Elena Cole? And why had the United States Navy declared her dead 7 years ago? The helicopters didn't land gently. They dropped onto the roof like fists slamming a table. Heavy, deliberate, final. The whole building shuddered. Light fixtures swayed. A coffee mug slid off the nurse's station and shattered on the floor. And nobody bent down to pick it up because every pair of eyes was looking up. Elena heard it before anyone told her. She was washing her hands at the sink outside Trauma Bay 1, watching the water turn pink as it spiraled down the drain. Her fingers were steady, her breathing was even, but somewhere deep in her chest, something she hadn't felt in 7 years began to tighten. She knew that sound. She knew the weight of it, the way Navy rotors cut air differently than civilian aircraft. Heavier, angrier, like they were punishing the sky for being in the way. She turned off the water, dried her hands, and waited. It didn't take long. A security guard appeared at the end of the corridor, young, stiff, clearly out of his depth. He walked toward her with a kind of posture that said he'd been given orders he didn't understand. "Ma'am, we need you to stay where you are." Elena didn't move. "For what reason?" "Orders," he said. "Military." Her jaw tightened, just a fraction, just enough that someone who knew her would have noticed. "I'm a nurse in this hospital. I have patients." "Ma'am, I'm just doing what I was told." She looked at him, really looked. He was maybe 23, probably hired 6 months ago, same as her. Probably never expected to spend his Tuesday afternoon locking down a civilian hospital on orders from people who outranked his entire chain of command. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll wait." But waiting was the one thing Elena Cole had never been good at. Down the corridor, doors were closing, not slamming, clicking. One by one, with a mechanical precision that had nothing to do with hospital protocol. Stairwells locked, elevators redirected. A perimeter was forming, invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Elena knew what to look for. She counted the exits in her head, a habit she'd never been able to break. 2 stairwells, 1 service elevator, the ambulance bay, the loading dock behind the cafeteria. She mapped them without thinking, the way most people breathe. Footsteps echoed from the east corridor. Not rushing, not hesitating, the footsteps of men who owned every room they entered. They came around the corner in formation. 4 of them, dark uniforms, faces unreadable. Navy. Not hospital security, not police. The real thing. And at their center walked a man Elena hadn't seen in 7 years. Admiral James Whitford. He was older now. Silver had taken his temples completely, and the lines around his eyes had deepened into something permanent. But he carried himself the same way. Shoulders squared, chin level, eyes scanning everything twice before settling on what mattered. He scanned the corridor once, twice, and then he saw her. He stopped walking, completely. The men around him continued 2 steps before realizing their commander was no longer moving. They adjusted without a word, forming a loose perimeter that was protective without being aggressive. But the Admiral didn't notice them. He was staring at Elena the way a man stares at a headstone that just spoke his name. Elena felt the weight of his gaze hit her like a wave. 7 years of silence. 7 years of being no one. 7 years of scrubs and name badges and quiet shifts, and pretending the nightmares were just bad dreams. All of it, every carefully constructed wall, began to crack. The Admiral raised his hand, slowly, deliberately, and saluted. Not a casual gesture, not a formality, a full, proper military salute, the kind given to someone who has earned it in blood. Every conversation in that corridor died. A nurse carrying a chart stopped mid-step. An orderly pushing a wheelchair froze. Dr. Calloway, who had followed the uniforms from the stairwell, stood 5 feet behind the Admiral with his mouth slightly open. Elena didn't return the salute. She couldn't. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't supposed to exist. But her posture shifted, just slightly. Her spine straightened. Her shoulders squared. It was involuntary, muscle memory from a life she tried to erase. "Admiral," she said, 1 word, spoken quietly, and the entire corridor felt it. Whitford lowered his hand. His eyes hadn't left hers. "How are you still alive?" he asked. His voice was controlled, but there was something underneath, something that sounded like a man who just watched his own certainty collapse. "We recovered remains, Elena. We had dental records. We had thermal confirmation." "You recovered what you were supposed to find," she replied. The silence that followed was so thick, Elena could feel it pressing against her skin. "SEAL Team 7's support element was declared wiped out," the Admiral said. "The official report states no survivors from the rear unit." "Not all of us died, Admiral." "Then why?" He stopped himself, took a breath, started again. "Why didn't you report? Why didn't you come in?" Elena met his gaze with the calm, flat steadiness of someone who had answered this question 1,000 times in her own head. "Because I was done being useful, and I was tired of being counted." Whitford stared at her. Behind him, his men shifted uncomfortably. They didn't know what they were witnessing, but they knew it was above their clearance. 7 years, the Admiral said softly. 7 years, and you've been here the whole time. Not here, but close enough. "We buried you, Elena." "You buried someone," she corrected, and her voice, for the first time, carried an edge. "His name was Danny Vega. He was 26 years old. He took 2 rounds covering our withdrawal, and he died in my arms before I could stop the bleeding. I put my tags around his neck because his were gone, and because I knew if they found a body with my identification, they'd stop looking. And they did." The Admiral's face changed. Not dramatically. Whitford was too disciplined for that, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a wall giving way to water. "Vega," he repeated. "Sergeant Daniel Vega. He saved 3 lives that night, including the colonel who's lying in your trauma bay right now. And you buried him under my name." Calloway, still standing behind the admiral, looked like a man who'd walked into the wrong movie. His surgical mask hung around his neck. His gloves were still on. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "She's military?" he said to no one in particular. Nobody answered him. The admiral took one step closer to Elena. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. "Command wrote that report." "Command wrote what was convenient," Elena replied. "They couldn't admit they left someone behind, so they didn't." "I signed that report," Whitford said, and for the first time, his voice cracked. "Not much, just enough. I signed off on your death." Elena looked at him, not with anger, not with forgiveness, with something in between that had no name. "I know you did." Before either of them could say another word, an alarm blared from Trauma Bay 1. Sharp, urgent, the kind of sound that cuts through everything. "General's BP is dropping," a voice shouted from inside the bay. 80 over 40 and falling. "We're losing him." Elena moved before her brain caught up. She pushed past the admiral, physically pushed past him, shoulder to shoulder, and was through the Trauma Bay doors before his security detail could react. Calloway was right behind her. "What happened?" he demanded. The anesthesiologist was already adjusting drips, face tight with controlled panic. He was stable, vitals were holding, then his pressure just cratered, no warning. Elena was at the bedside. Her hands found the general's chest. Not the wound, but the space around it. She pressed lightly, shifted, pressed again. Her eyes narrowed. "It's not surgical," she said. Calloway leaned in. "If there's an internal bleed, it's not a bleed," Elena said firmly. "This is rebound hypotension, adrenaline crash." His body held it together for the extraction, and now it's letting go. "I've seen this before." "In what context?" the anesthesiologist asked sharply. Elena didn't answer that question. "Push 0.3 mils epinephrine. Elevate his legs and reduce the propofol drip by half. He's metabolizing it faster than you expected." Calloway hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then, "Do what she says." The team moved. Epi pushed, legs elevated, drip adjusted. Elena kept her hand on the general's chest, feeling for the response she knew was coming. 10 seconds. Nothing. 20 seconds. The monitor flickered. 30 seconds, and his BP began to climb. Slowly at first, then steadily. 82, 86, 90, 94. The room exhaled. "How did you know that?" the anesthesiologist asked, disbelief cracking through his professional composure. "That wasn't in any protocol I've ever—" "It wouldn't be," Elena said, pulling her hand away. "That reaction happens in the field when a casualty's body has been running on pure adrenaline for too long. You don't see it in hospitals because patients usually aren't conscious and fighting for their lives before they hit the table." She turned to Calloway. "He'll dip one more time in about 40 minutes. Same pattern. Be ready this time." Calloway nodded slowly, looking at her like she was a textbook he'd never been given access to. The admiral stood in the doorway through all of it, watching, processing, and when Elena finally stepped back from the bedside, he was still there, blocking the exit, not physically, but in every other way that mattered. "Command is on their way," he said quietly. Elena peeled off her gloves. "I figured they're going to want answers. They always do. They're going to want you back." Elena dropped the gloves in the bin and looked at him. "I'm not going back." "That might not be your choice." "It's always my choice, Admiral. That's the one thing I learned out there that the Navy never taught me." She walked past him. He let her go, but called after her, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Your name is on a wall, Elena." She stopped. Her back was to him. She didn't turn around. "At Langley, on the memorial wall, your star is there, has been for 7 years." Something moved through Elena's body. Not a flinch, not a shudder, something deeper. Something that lived in the place where grief and identity meet. I know, she said, and then quieter. I've seen it. She kept walking, past the nurses who were pretending not to stare, past the security guards who didn't know whether to stop her or salute her, past the consultation rooms and the supply closets, in the break room where someone had left the TV on, and a news anchor was already saying the words, "Shooting at Fort McNair," while a red banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. She found an empty room at the end of the east corridor. Small, no windows, the kind of room where doctors delivered bad news to families. She closed the door, leaned against it, and pressed both palms flat against her face. She didn't cry. She'd stopped being able to do that years ago. But she stood there for a full 60 seconds, breathing, centering, fighting the tide of a past that had just broken through every dam she'd built. Danny Vega's face, the sound of gunfire in the Sangin Valley, the colonel, now a general, bleeding out in the dirt while she held his neck together with her bare hands. The moment she made the decision to stay behind, the moment she knew what it meant. She dropped her hands, straightened up, opened the door. Calloway was standing right there, waiting. "You shouldn't be alone right now," he said. "I've been alone for 7 years, doctor. I'm good at it." "That's not what I meant." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I just watched you do something in my operating room that I couldn't do. Something I've never seen anyone do outside of a war zone documentary. And now there are Navy officers in my hospital, and my patient, a United States general, called you Doc like he's known you his entire life." He stepped closer. Not aggressive, just present. "I'm not military. I'm not intelligence. I'm a surgeon. And I'm asking you, as someone who just watched you save a man's life twice in 1 hour, who are you?" Elena looked at him for a long time. "I'm a nurse," she said finally. "That's all I want to be." "But it's not all you are," she didn't answer. Because down the corridor, boots were moving again, more of them now, heavier, closer. And a voice she hadn't heard cut through the ambient noise of the hospital. The general was awake, and he was calling her name. Not Elena, the name she'd buried with Danny Vega. The name that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. And every person in that hallway heard it. The name echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. "Petty Officer Cole." 3 words, spoken in a voice raw from surgery, barely above a whisper, but somehow loud enough to reach every ear in that hallway. General Marcus Holt was propped up in his bed, tubes running from his arms, monitors beeping their mechanical rhythm, and his eyes, glassy, exhausted, but absolutely certain, were locked on the doorway. Elena froze, mid-step, mid-breath. The air left her lungs like someone had punched it out. Calloway turned to her. "Petty Officer?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, because the name the general had just spoken wasn't Elena Cole. It was the name on a dog tag she'd wrapped around a dead man's neck in the Afghan dirt 7 years ago. The name etched into a star on a wall at Langley. The name of a ghost. "Petty Officer Cole," Holt called again, louder now, fighting the sedation. "I know it's you. I know your voice. Get in here." A nurse inside the bay tried to calm him. "Sir, you need to stay still. Your vitals. I've been shot 3 times today," Holt growled. "My vitals can wait. Get her in here." The Admiral appeared at Elena's side. She hadn't heard him approach. "He's not going to stop," Whitford said quietly. "I know." "Then go." Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides. Not from anger, from something older than anger, from the knowledge that the moment she walked through that door and let Marcus Holt look at her face in full consciousness, the life she'd spent 7 years building would be finished. She went anyway. The trauma bay felt different now, smaller. The urgency was gone, replaced by something heavier, the weight of recognition. Holt's eyes found her the instant she crossed the threshold, and his whole body seemed to settle. Like a man who'd been holding a breath he didn't know he was holding. "It is you," he said. Elena stopped at the foot of his bed. "General, you need to rest." "Don't general me." His voice cracked, and he didn't try to hide it. I watched you die. Do you understand that? I carried your name for 7 years. I spoke at your memorial. I handed a flag to a woman I'd never met because they told me she was your mother. Elena's throat tightened. She wasn't my mother. I know that now. His eyes glistened. But I didn't know it then, and it broke something in me that never healed right. She said nothing. There was nothing to say. You stayed behind, Holt continued, his voice dropping. In Sangin, when everything went sideways, you ordered us to move, and you stayed. I didn't order you, sir. You outranked me. You grabbed my collar, looked me in the eye, and said, and I remember every word, Colonel, if you don't move your legs in the next 3 seconds, I will drag you, and I am not gentle. That was an order. I don't care what your rank was. Something flickered across Elena's face, the ghost of a memory she tried to kill. Vega was already down, Holt said. I saw him fall. He didn't fall, Elena corrected quietly. He stepped in front of the second RPG, the one aimed at you. Silence. The monitor beeped 5 times before Holt spoke again. Danny Vega saved my life. Yes. And then you saved it again. You stopped the bleeding in my neck with your bare hands. In the dark. Under fire. You were losing too much blood. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, Holt said. You could have run. You could have followed the team out. Nobody would have blamed you. Danny would have. That landed hard. Holt closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. They told me you were killed in the secondary explosion, he said. They showed me photographs. They showed me remains. Those were Danny's remains, Elena said. I put my tags on him. I knew if they found my identification on a body, they'd close the file. They'd stop searching, and the team would be safe. Safe from what? Elena hesitated. This was the part she'd never spoken out loud. Not to anyone. Not even to herself in the dark hours when the memories came uninvited. From the truth, she said finally, about what really happened that night. About who gave the order that sent us into that valley with bad intelligence and no extraction plan. The room went cold. Calloway, standing near the door, looked at the Admiral. The Admiral's face had turned to stone. Elena, Whitford said, a warning. He asked, she replied without turning. He's earned an answer. Holt pushed himself up slightly, wincing. What are you saying? I'm saying that Sangin wasn't a mission that went wrong, General. It was a mission that was never supposed to go right. We were sent into that valley as a diversion. The intelligence was fabricated. Our extraction was delayed on purpose. Someone needed a distraction for an operation happening 40 miles east, and SEAL Team 7's support element was considered expendable. The word hung in the air like smoke. That's a serious accusation, the Admiral said from the doorway. Elena turned to face him now. It's not an accusation. It's what happened. Danny Vega died because someone decided our lives were worth less than operational cover. And when I survived, when I made it out against every calculation they'd made, I became a problem. A living witness to a decision that was never supposed to have survivors. So you disappeared, Calloway said. He'd been quiet so long that everyone startled slightly at his voice. I disappeared, Elena confirmed, because the alternative was being disappeared. Holt's hand found hers. His grip was weak but fierce. Who gave the order? That doesn't matter anymore. The hell it doesn't. General Marcus, he said firmly. After everything, you call me Marcus. She swallowed. Marcus, the man who gave that order, retired 2 years ago. He's living in Virginia with a pension and a clear conscience. Going after him now would mean exposing the operation he was covering for, which is still classified. It would mean a congressional inquiry. It would mean dragging Danny's family through a public spectacle that wouldn't bring him back. So he just gets away with it? He got away with it 7 years ago, Elena said. The day they buried me instead of holding anyone accountable. The Admiral stepped fully into the room now. His security detail remained outside, but their shadows stretched across the floor. Elena, I need you to listen to me carefully, Whitford said. What you just said, about Sangan, about the intelligence, about the order, I need to know if you have proof. Would it matter if I did? Yes, it would matter a great deal. She studied his face, searching for the things she'd learned to look for in every commanding officer she'd ever served under. The difference between a man who wanted the truth and a man who wanted to control it. I have Danny's field recorder, she said. The Admiral's composure cracked. Just for a second, just enough. He recorded everything, Elena continued. Every mission, every briefing, every order received. It was against protocol, and I told him 100 times to stop, but Danny was Danny. He didn't trust anyone who sat behind a desk, and he wanted a record in case things went wrong. And things went wrong, Whitford said. Things went very wrong, and that recorder captured all of it. The original mission brief with the fabricated coordinates, the delayed extraction call, the radio traffic that proved someone on the command chain knew we were walking into a dead zone and sent us anyway. Holt's grip on her hand tightened. Where is it? Safe. Where? Safe, Elena repeated, and it stays that way. Elena, the Admiral started. No. Her voice was quiet but absolute. That recorder is the only reason I'm still alive. As long as I have it, and they know I have it, I'm a liability they can't afford to touch. The moment I hand it over, to you, to command, to anyone, I become a loose end. And I've seen what happens to loose ends. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing in that room. Heavier than the equipment, heavier than the uniforms, heavier than the history between three people who'd been broken by the same night in different ways. Calloway cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. I don't understand half of what's happening here, he said carefully, but I understand one thing. That woman just saved this man's life. Twice. In my operating room, using skills that shouldn't exist on a nursing resume and knowledge that doesn't come from any school I've ever heard of. Whatever she's done, whatever she's hiding, whatever you people want from her, she earned the right to make her own choices today. In my hospital. The Admiral looked at him. Doctor, with all due respect, this is a matter of national... With all due respect, Admiral, this is my trauma bay and my patient and the woman who just pulled a bullet out of his heart. So you'll forgive me if I'm not ready to hand her over to the same people she says tried to get her killed. Elena stared at Calloway. She'd expected many things today. She hadn't expected a civilian surgeon to stand between her and the United States Navy. Thank you, Doctor, she said softly. Don't thank me. Just tell me you're not planning to disappear again. Not today. Holt coughed, a wet, painful sound that made the monitors spike briefly. Elena was at his side immediately, adjusting his positioning, checking the drain. You need to stop talking, she told him. One more thing, he rasped. The shooter, at the ceremony, did they catch him? The Admiral nodded. Taken down on sight, dead. Who was he? A pause. The kind of pause that holds more information than words. We're still working on that, Whitford said. Elena's head snapped toward him. You don't know who shot a United States general at an award ceremony in the nation's capital? I said we're working on it. That means you know exactly who he is and you don't want to say it out loud. The Admiral's jaw tightened. Elena. Was it connected? She asked. Her voice had changed, harder now. The nurse was gone. The combat medic was back. Was the shooting connected to Sanjan? We don't have evidence of... Admiral, was it connected? Whitford looked at her, then at Holt, then back at her. The shooter, he said slowly, was carrying identification linking him to a private military contractor that was operational in Helmand Province during the same period as your deployment. The room stopped breathing. Elena released the general's hand and stepped back. Her face was blank, completely, terrifyingly blank. The kind of blank that Calloway recognized from soldiers he treated in the VA rotation during his residency. The face of someone whose worst suspicion had just been confirmed. They weren't just covering up Sangin, she said quietly. They're still cleaning it up. We don't know that for certain, the Admiral insisted. A contractor linked to our deployment just put 3 bullets in the man I saved in Afghanistan. The man who can corroborate everything on that recorder. And you're telling me that's a coincidence? Whitford said nothing, which was its own answer. Holt reached for Elena's arm. If they came for me, they'll come for you. They already tried, Elena said. 7 years ago. They just think they succeeded. Elena, listen to me, the Admiral said, stepping closer. If what you're suggesting is true, if the shooting today is connected to the Sangin operation, then you're not safe. Not here, not anywhere civilian. I've kept myself alive for 7 years without the Navy's help. You've been hiding for 7 years. That's not the same thing. And now your cover is blown. Every person in this corridor saw me salute you. Every nurse on this floor is going to talk. By tonight, your face will be on someone's desk. By tomorrow, the people you're afraid of will know you're alive. Elena felt it then, that cold, familiar weight settling into her bones. The same weight she'd felt in the Sangin Valley when she realized the extraction wasn't coming. The same weight she'd felt in the village clinic when she woke up and understood that the world had moved on without her. Then I need to move, she said. Not alone, Holt said from the bed. Not this time. General, Marcus, he corrected again, and I outrank everyone in this room, including you, Admiral. So here's what's going to happen. She stays with me. Wherever you transfer me, she comes. And nobody touches her or that recorder until I'm on my feet and we sort this out properly. The Admiral looked at Elena. Will you accept that? She thought of Danny, of the recorder hidden in a storage locker in Baltimore, of the 7 years she'd spent becoming nobody, and of the 3 bullets that had just proven nobody was exactly who they were still looking for. I don't have much choice, she said. You always have a choice, Holt said, echoing her own words back to her. You taught me that. Elena looked at the man on the bed, shot 3 times, chest still held together with her sutures, eyes burning with the kind of stubborn, impossible fire that had kept him alive in a valley in Afghanistan when every odds said he should have died. Okay, she said, but we do this my way. The Admiral raised an eyebrow. Your way? My way. No press, no official channels. No one outside this room knows the full picture until I decide otherwise. And if I even suspect that command is more interested in protecting itself than finding the truth, I take that recorder to the Washington Post and let the American public decide who's expendable. Whitford's face went white, genuinely white. You wouldn't. Admiral, Elena said, I survived a mission designed to kill me, buried my best friend under my own name, pulled a bullet from a beating heart with my bare hands, and kept the United States Navy believing I was dead for 7 years. Don't tell me what I wouldn't do. Nobody argued, nobody said a word. And somewhere in a storage locker in Baltimore, a dead man's recorder sat in the dark, holding the truth about a night that was never supposed to have survivors, waiting for the one person who'd made it out alive to finally stop running. The transfer happened within the hour. No announcement, no paperwork that anyone on the hospital floor would ever see. One moment, General Marcus Holt was in Trauma Bay 1 at St. Lawrence Memorial. The next, his bed was empty, the sheets stripped, and the only evidence he'd ever been there was a blood stain on the floor that housekeeping hadn't reached yet. Elena rode in the back of the military ambulance with him. She'd insisted on it, not as a nurse, not as a former petty officer, but as the only person in the vehicle who'd kept this man alive twice in one afternoon and wasn't about to let a bumpy ride through D.C. traffic undo her work. The Admiral sat across from her. 2 armed Navy personnel flanked the rear doors. Nobody spoke for the first 6 minutes. Then Holt, who was supposed to be sedated, opened his eyes. Where are we going? He asked. Walter Reed, the Admiral said. Secure wing. I hate Walter Reed. Everyone hates Walter Reed, General. You're going anyway. Holt's eyes drifted to Elena. You're still here. Told you I wasn't disappearing. You told me not today. That's not the same thing. She almost smiled. Almost. Go back to sleep, Marcus. Can't. Too many people trying to kill me. Keeps me alert. The Admiral leaned forward. General, we need to discuss security arrangements for... Not now, James. Holt's voice was fading, the sedation pulling him back under. Talk to her. She's the one running this show. His eyes closed. His breathing evened out. The monitors in the ambulance held steady. Whitford looked at Elena. He's not wrong. He usually isn't. The recorder, in Baltimore. I need to know exactly where it is. No, you don't. Elena, if the people behind the Sangan operation are active again, if they sent that shooter today, then whatever's on that recording is the only leverage we have. And it's sitting in a civilian storage facility with a combination lock and a prayer. It's survived 7 years. It can survive one more night. Can you? That stopped her. She looked at the Admiral, really looked, past the rank and the uniform and the authority. She saw a man who was tired, not physically, the kind of tired that comes from carrying classified weight for decades, from signing documents that erase people, from lying to families at funerals. You feel guilty, she said. That's not relevant. It's the only thing that's relevant. You signed my death certificate. You handed a flag to a stranger and told her I was a hero. And now you're sitting 3 feet away from me, and you don't know whether to protect me or contain me. Whitford's jaw worked silently for a moment. Both, he said finally. I want to do both, and I know I can't. Then choose. I choose to get you through tonight alive. Everything else we figure out tomorrow. The ambulance slowed, stopped. Doors opened. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center swallowed them whole. Elena had never been inside, at least not as Elena Cole. The last time she'd been in a military hospital, she'd ripped out her own IV and walked out in borrowed clothes. That felt like another lifetime. It was another lifetime. They moved Holt into a secured room on the 4th floor. Private, guarded. 2 men at the door, 2 more at the elevator. Elena was given a chair beside his bed and a temporary badge that identified her as medical personnel, classified. She stared at the badge. Creative. Best we could do on short notice, the Admiral said. I need to make calls. Don't leave this floor. Wasn't planning on it. He left. The door closed. And for the first time since the ambulance had slammed through the St. Lawrence ER doors carrying a dying general, Elena was alone with the silence. She sat in the chair beside Holt's bed and listened to him breathe. Steady, rhythmic, alive, because she'd made him alive. Twice. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. A cheap prepaid, the kind you buy at a gas station and replace every 3 months. One new message from a number she didn't recognize. It read, "We know you're not dead." Elena's blood went cold. She stared at the screen. 5 words. No signature. No threat. Just a fact, delivered with the precision of someone who wanted her to know they were close. She deleted the message. Then she removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces in the trash. Her hands weren't shaking. They should have been. But the part of her that shook, the part that felt fear the way normal people felt fear, had died in the Sangan Valley alongside Danny Vega. What was left was something harder, something that didn't shake. It calculated. She needed that recorder. Tonight, not tomorrow, tonight. Holt stirred. His eyes opened halfway. "You've got that look," he murmured. "What look?" "The one you had right before you told me to run in Afghanistan, right before everything went to hell. Go back to sleep, Marcus." Something happened. She hesitated. Lying to him felt wrong. Not morally wrong, tactically wrong. He was the only person in this building who understood the full picture, and keeping him in the dark made him vulnerable. "Someone knows I'm alive," she said. "Someone outside this building." Holt's eyes sharpened instantly. The sedation was still in his system, but his mind was cutting through it like a blade through fog. The shooter's people? Maybe, or someone connected. The message was sent to a phone that shouldn't be traceable, which means they didn't trace the phone. They traced me. How? The hospital. When the Admiral saluted me in the corridor, there were 30 people watching. All it takes is one phone, one photo, one text to the wrong person. Damn it, James, Holt breathed. It's not his fault. He didn't expect to find me alive. He should have been more careful. He's a Navy admiral, not a spy. There's a difference. Holt tried to sit up. Elena put her hand on his shoulder, firm, not gentle. Don't. You need to stay in this bed and heal. You've got 63 sutures in your chest, a cardiac event in your recent history, and 3 holes that weren't there this morning. You're not going anywhere. Then you're not going anywhere either. Marcus, I mean it. His hand found her wrist. His grip was stronger than it should have been. If they know you're alive, then the recorder isn't leverage anymore. It's a target, and so are you. I've been a target before, and you ended up buried under someone else's name. How'd that work out? That hit harder than she expected. I need to get to Baltimore, she said quietly. Tonight, before they figure out what I have and where it is. Then take someone with you. Who? The Admiral's men? Navy personnel? The same institution that signed off on Sanjan? Take Calloway. Elena blinked. The surgeon? He's civilian. He's got no dog in this fight, and he's already proven he'll stand up for you. He's a trauma surgeon, not an operator. You don't need an operator, you need a witness. Someone outside the chain of command who can verify what's on that recorder if something happens to you. Elena stared at him. It was a good idea, a painfully good idea. The kind of thinking that had made Marcus Holt one of the most respected strategic minds in the Army. You're supposed to be recovering, she said. My body's recovering. My brain never stopped. She squeezed his hand once. I'll be back before morning. You better be. I'm not letting them bury you twice. She found Calloway in the 4th floor waiting area. He was still in his scrubs, sitting in a plastic chair, staring at a vending machine like it held the answers to everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. You're still here, she said. He looked up. They won't let me leave. Apparently, I'm a material witness to something no one will explain to me. I need your help. I figured it could be dangerous. More dangerous than watching you pull a bullet out of a man's heart while helicopters landed on my roof? Yes, actually, significantly more dangerous than that. Calloway stood up. What do you need? A car, your presence, and your willingness to not ask questions for about 2 hours. I'm a surgeon. I can do silence. Can you also drive fast? I drive a 2019 Camry. That'll work. They left through a service entrance that Elena had identified within 15 minutes of arriving at Walter Reed. She'd mapped the building's exits the way she mapped every building she entered, automatically, instinctively, like counting stairs or noting the nearest fire extinguisher. Calloway's Camry was parked in the visitor lot. He drove. Elena navigated from the passenger seat, giving directions one turn at a time, never more than 30 seconds ahead. You're not going to tell me where we're going, he said. Baltimore. That's an hour drive. 43 minutes if you take the 295 and don't stop. I meant that as a complaint. Noted. Keep driving. They rode in silence for 12 minutes. Then Calloway spoke. You were in the military. Yes. Navy. Yes. SEAL support. I'm not going to confirm operational details to a civilian in a Camry. You just did. She looked at him. He had the faintest trace of a smile on his face. The kind of smile that comes from a man who is terrified, but handling it with humor because that's the only tool he has. You're braver than you think, Doctor. I'm dumber than I think. There's a difference. Sometimes it's the same thing. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of Baltimore, wedged between an auto parts warehouse and a laundromat that had been closed since 2019. Elena had chosen it precisely because it was forgettable. No cameras that worked, no attendant after 8 p.m., just rows of metal units with padlocks in rust. She told Calloway to park across the street, engine off, lights off. Wait here. What if something happens? Drive away. I'm not going to. If something happens, Elena repeated, her voice carrying a weight that ended the argument. You drive away. You go back to Walter Reed. You tell the Admiral what happened, and you tell him to protect Marcus Holt with everything he has. Can you do that? Calloway swallowed. Yeah, I can do that. Good. She got out of the car, crossed the street. Her footsteps were silent. Not careful silent, trained silent. The lock on Unit 47 opened with a combination she'd never written down. Inside, behind a stack of boxes labeled Kitchen, Fragile, sat a fireproof safe the size of a shoebox. She dialed the combination, opened it, and there it was, Danny's field recorder. Small, black, unremarkable, the kind of thing you'd walk right past at a yard sale. But inside it held the voices of dead men, the orders that killed them, and the truth about a night the United States military had spent 7 years trying to erase. Elena held it in her hands for a long moment. She could feel Danny in it, not supernaturally, just the memory of him. The way he'd clip it to his vest before every mission. The way he'd tap it twice and say, just in case, Cole, just in case. She put it in her jacket pocket, closed the safe, locked the unit, turned to leave, and saw a man standing at the end of the row. He was dressed in civilian clothes, but he wasn't a civilian. Elena knew it the way she knew the difference between a heartbeat and a cardiac arrest, instantly, without analysis. Elena Cole, the man said calmly, or should I use your real rank? You should use the exit, she replied. He smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. We've been watching this unit for 2 years. We knew you'd come back eventually. We just had to give you a reason. Elena's stomach dropped. Not from fear, from realization. The shooting, she whispered. You shot Marcus Holt to draw me out. General Holt was a loose end. 2 birds, 1 bullet. 3 bullets, technically. Who sent you? The same people who sent you into the Sangan Valley. The same people who delayed your extraction. The same people who wrote the report that said you were dead. He took a step closer. And now they'd very much like that to be true. Elena's hand moved to her pocket. The recorder pressed against her fingers like a heartbeat. That won't leave this building, the man said. Neither will you, Elena replied. Something in her voice, something cold, something ancient, something that had been sleeping for 7 years, woke up. The man saw it, and for the first time his smile flickered. He reached inside his jacket. Elena moved first. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Not because Elena was faster, though she was. Not because she was stronger, though adrenaline made her close enough. It lasted 11 seconds because she fought the way combat medics fight, not to win, but to end it. No wasted movement, no hesitation, no mercy. The man hit the concrete floor, disarmed, gasping, his right arm bent at an angle that would require surgical intervention. And Elena noted the irony without humor. She took his weapon, checked the magazine, full. She ejected it, cleared the chamber, and dropped the pieces in separate directions. Tell whoever sent you, she said, standing over him, that Petty Officer Cole sends her regards. And tell them the recorder has already been copied, 3 times, to 3 different locations they'll never find. Killing me won't erase it. It'll just make sure every news outlet in the country gets a copy by morning. The man stared up at her, pain and fear fighting for control of his face. You're bluffing, he gasped. Elena leaned down close enough for him to see her eyes. I survived Sangan. I buried my best friend. I spent 7 years as a ghost. And today, I pulled a bullet out of a general's heart with my bare hands. She paused. Do I look like someone who bluffs? She left him on the floor and walked back to the Camry. Got in. Close the door. Calloway looked at her. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "You're bleeding," he said. Elena glanced at her hand. A scrape across her knuckles. She hadn't noticed. "It's not mine," she said. "Drive." He drove. Neither of them spoke until they were back on the highway, Baltimore shrinking in the rearview mirror, the recorder heavy in Elena's pocket and heavier in her chest. "Was it there?" Calloway finally asked. "Yes. Is it what you needed?" "It's what everyone needs. They just don't know it yet." She pressed her head against the window and closed her eyes. Somewhere behind them, a man with a broken arm was making a phone call. Somewhere ahead of them, an admiral was pacing a hospital corridor. And somewhere in a secured room at Walter Reed, a general with 3 bullet holes and 63 sutures was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a ghost to come home. Elena opened her eyes. The highway lights strobed across her face in steady rhythm. "Doctor," she said. "Yeah?" "Thank you. For driving, for not asking, for standing up in that trauma bay. You would have done the same." "No," she said quietly. "I would have done something much more reckless." Calloway let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "That's not comforting." It wasn't meant to be. They drove on through the dark, carrying the truth between them like a live grenade with no pin, heading back toward the only man who could decide whether it would heal the wound or blow everything apart. They made it back to Walter Reed at 11:47 p.m. The highway had been empty, the night thick and heavy, and Calloway had driven the last 20 minutes in a silence so dense it felt like a third passenger. Elena walked through the service entrance with the recorder in her jacket pocket and blood on her knuckles that she still hadn't wiped off. 2 guards at the elevator checked her badge without looking at her face. She let them. She was already past them by the time they realized they should have asked about the scrape on her hand. 4th floor, secured wing. She pushed open the door to Holt's room, expecting to find him asleep. He was sitting up, not just awake, upright, IV lines be damned, arguing with a nurse who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. "I told you I don't need more morphine. I need to know where—" His eyes found Elena in the doorway. The fight went out of his voice instantly. "There she is." "You should be flat on your back," Elena said. "I should be dead. We're way past should. Did you get it?" She pulled the recorder from her pocket, held it up. Small, black. The weight of 7 years and 5 lives compressed into something that fit in her palm. Holt exhaled. The kind of exhale that carries years of tension out of a body. "Danny's recorder. Danny's recorder. Is it intact?" "I haven't played it yet, but Danny built things to last. Even the things he wasn't supposed to build." "Play it." Elena looked at the nurse, who was standing frozen near the IV stand, clearly aware she was witnessing something far above her clearance level. "Give us the room," Elena said quietly. The nurse left without a word. Elena closed the door, set the recorder on the bedside table, looked at Holt. "Once I press play, there's no going back. You understand that?" "I've been shot 3 times today, Elena. I went back about 6 hours ago." She pressed play. The audio was rough. Wind noise, static, the ambient crackle of a field recording made in conditions that were never meant for documentation. But under the noise, the voices were clear. Painfully clear. The first voice was Danny Vega's. Young, steady, running through a pre-mission check with the casual professionalism of a man who trusted his team and didn't trust much else. "Recording active, 22:15 local, Sangan Valley insertion. Mission brief received 1400. Coordinates as follows." He read them off. Elena's jaw tightened. She'd memorized those coordinates 7 years ago. They were the coordinates of a dead zone, a position with no strategic value, no enemy presence, and no extraction route. Then a second voice came through, older, authoritative, the voice of command. "Team 7 support, you are cleared for insertion. Extraction window is 0300. Acknowledge." Danny's voice. "Acknowledged. Extraction at 0300. We'll be ready." Negative, Sergeant, you misunderstand. Extraction is scheduled for 0300. Whether it arrives is contingent on primary operation status. Do you copy? A pause on the recording. The sound of Danny breathing once, twice. Then, copy, contingent on primary, understood. The recording continued. More voices, more orders. The sound of boots on gravel, of weapons being checked, of a team moving into position without knowing they were walking into a grave. And then, 12 minutes into the recording, a voice that made the Admiral stop breathing. Whitford had entered the room at some point during playback. Elena hadn't heard him come in. She didn't care, because the voice now coming through the recorder belonged to Colonel Richard Ames, retired, decorated, living comfortably in McLean, Virginia, and he was giving an order that would kill 5 people. Delay extraction for Team 7 support. Priority is Operation Kingfisher. If the support element is compromised, they are expendable. Confirm. Another voice, quieter. Sir, if we delay extraction, they won't survive the night. Ames. I'm aware. Confirm the order. Confirmed. The recording kept playing, but the room had stopped. Holt's face was white. Not from blood loss, from rage. The kind of rage that doesn't burn hot. It burns cold. Ice cold. Richard Ames, he said. Richard Ames, Elena confirmed. He was my commanding officer. I know. He came to my promotion ceremony. He shook my hand. He told me he was sorry about Sangan. He told me it was a tragedy that couldn't have been prevented. Holt's voice cracked. Not from weakness, from the sheer, crushing weight of betrayal. He looked me in the eye and lied. He's been lying for 7 years, Elena said. To you, to the families, to Congress. The Admiral stepped forward. His face was ashen. That recording is admissible. If the chain of custody can be verified, it can be verified, Elena said. Danny recorded the date, time, GPS coordinates, and mission identifier at the start of every file. It matches the official operation logs, the ones that were supposedly classified and archived. But the order to delay extraction? That wasn't in any official log, because Ames had it removed. How do you know it was removed? Whitford asked. Because I saw the original logs before they were altered. Danny wasn't the only one who didn't trust desk officers. I made copies of the mission brief before insertion. Paper copies. They're with the recorder. Holt looked at Whitford. James, you heard that recording. I heard it. That's a United States colonel ordering the deliberate abandonment of American service members. That's not negligence. That's murder. I know what it is, Marcus. Then do something about it. The Admiral closed his eyes for a full 3 seconds. When he opened them, something had shifted. The caution was gone. The political calculation was gone. What was left was the man underneath, the officer who had signed Elena's death certificate and never forgiven himself for it. I'll need that recorder, he said. Elena picked it up, held it. For a moment, she couldn't let go. This small, battered device was the last thing Danny Vega had touched, the last piece of him that still existed in the world. Giving it away felt like losing him all over again. Elena, Holt said gently. She handed it to the Admiral. I want copies made immediately, she said. 3. 1 goes to the Inspector General. 1 goes to the Senate Armed Services Committee. 1 stays with me. Agreed, Whitford said. And I want Danny Vega's headstone corrected. His real name, his real rank, his real sacrifice, before any of this goes public. The Admiral nodded. I'll make the call personally. Tonight. Tonight. And one more thing. Elena's voice hardened. The man who attacked me in Baltimore, he told me the shooting at Fort McNair was orchestrated. General Holt was targeted specifically because he could corroborate the Sangan cover-up. They shot him to silence him and to draw me out. We'll find who sent him, Whitford said. You already know who sent him, Elena replied. Ames may be retired, but his network isn't. The private military contractor linked to the shooter, Greystone Solutions. They were operational in Helmand during Sangan. They provided the false intelligence that sent us into that valley. And they're still active, still contracted, still being paid with taxpayer money. Holt's hand found Elena's arm. She's right, James. This isn't one man. It's a system, and it's still running. The Admiral looked at both of them, the general who'd nearly died, the ghost who'd come back to life, and made a decision that would end careers, including possibly his own. I'm calling the Secretary of the Navy, he said, tonight, and I'm recommending a full investigation into Operation Kingfisher, Colonel Ames, and Greystone Solutions. That'll start a firestorm, Holt said. It should have started 7 years ago. The Admiral turned to leave, then stopped. He looked at Elena with something she hadn't seen from him before. Not guilt, not pity, respect. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry. For signing that report, for closing your file, for every day you spent alone because I chose the easy answer. Elena held his gaze. You didn't choose the easy answer, Admiral. You chose the only answer they gave you. Now you've got a different one. He nodded once and left the room. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, faster than before, heavier with purpose. Holt settled back against his pillows. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was returning. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his breathing shortened. You need rest, she said. I need to know you're okay. I've been okay for 7 years. You've been surviving for 7 years. That's not the same thing. She sat down in the chair beside his bed, the same chair she'd been given hours ago, when this was still supposed to be a quiet assignment watching over a sleeping patient. Danny would be proud of you, Holt said. Elena's throat closed. She fought it, lost. Danny would be alive if I'd been faster, she whispered. Danny would be alive if Ames hadn't sent us into a death trap. That's not on you. It was never on you. I was the medic. It was my job to keep everyone alive. And you did. You kept me alive. You kept Rodriguez alive. You kept Patterson alive. 3 out of 5 in a situation designed to kill all of us. Danny didn't die because you failed, Elena. He died because he chose to stand, just like you chose to stay. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. One quick motion, efficient even in grief. I see his face every night, she said. Every single night for 7 years. I know. I see it too. They sat in silence for a long time. Not uncomfortable, not heavy. The silence of two people who had survived the same fire and didn't need words to acknowledge the burns. What are you going to do now? Holt asked finally. I don't know. I can't go back to St. Lawrence. That life is over. What life do you want? She thought about it, really thought, for the first time in years. She'd spent so long running, so long hiding, so long being nobody, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to choose. I want to do what I've always done, she said. Help people who are hurting. People like us. Veterans who came home and found out that home doesn't fit anymore. There's a facility, Holt said. Veterans Recovery Center. Edge of the city. They've been short-staffed for years. Trauma medicine, long-term care, rehabilitation. No command structure, no press, no uniforms. How do you know about it? I've been sending people there for 3 years. Good people who needed help I couldn't give them. Elena looked at him. You're recommending me for a job while you've got 63 sutures in your chest. Best time to make decisions. No one argues with a man in a hospital bed. The investigation moved fast once the recorder was authenticated. Within 72 hours, the Inspector General's office had opened a formal inquiry. Within a week, Colonel Richard Ames was placed under military arrest at his home in McLean. Within a month, 6 additional officers were implicated in the Sanjing cover-up, and Greystone Solutions had its government contract suspended pending review. It never made the front page. These things rarely do. The machinery of accountability grinds quietly when it grinds at all. But it ground. Danny Vega's headstone was corrected on a Tuesday. Elena drove to Arlington alone. She stood in front of the new stone, his real name, his real rank, his real dates, and said nothing for a very long time. She didn't cry. She'd done her crying at Walter Reed, in a plastic chair beside a general's bed, at 2 in the morning when no one was watching. She just stood there and let the wind move through the silence. "I kept my promise, Danny," she said finally. "They know your name now." She left a single challenge coin on top of the headstone, the one Danny had carried in his vest pocket on every mission. She'd taken it from his body before she'd placed her tags around his neck. She'd carried it for 7 years. It was time to give it back. The Veterans Recovery Center was everything Holt had described and nothing like what she'd expected. It was quiet, unassuming, full of people who carry their wars in different ways, some loud, some silent, some in the space between. Men and women who had given pieces of themselves to a country that didn't always know how to give back. Elena started on a Wednesday. She didn't introduce herself with titles. She didn't talk about her past. She showed up in scrubs, with steady hands and a calm voice, and she did what she'd always done best. She healed. The first veteran who grabbed her wrist during a flashback, a 24-year-old Marine named Torres, who'd lost both legs in Fallujah, held on so tight she could feel his pulse through his fingertips. "Don't leave," he begged, eyes wide, trapped in a memory that wouldn't release him. "I'm not going anywhere," Elena said. She breathed with him, slow, steady, the way she'd breathed beside Danny Vega in the dirt while the bullets flew overhead. Torres came back, his eyes cleared, his grip loosened. He looked at her like she'd pulled him out of the ocean. "You've been there," he said, not a question. "Yeah," she said, "I've been there." Word spread, not through headlines, through trust, the kind that builds one patient at a time, one steady hand at a time, one night shift at a time. General Marcus Holt recovered fully. He returned to duty 3 months later and never spoke publicly about Elena Cole. She'd asked him not to. But every year, on the anniversary of the Sangin ambush, a card arrived at the Veterans Recovery Center, unsigned, same message every time. Still counting. Elena kept them all in her desk drawer, next to the small plaque that read her name and a single line underneath. "Quiet professionals still save lives." The Admiral visited once. No entourage, no uniform. He stood in the doorway and watched Elena move through the ward, calm, present, unbreakable, and turned to the staff member beside him. "She's where she belongs," the woman said. Whitford nodded. "She always was. We just took 7 years to figure it out." Calloway visited too, brought coffee, sat with her in the break room and asked the one question he'd been holding since the night he drove her to Baltimore. "Do you regret it? Any of it? Disappearing, coming back, the 7 years in between?" Elena held the coffee between both hands and thought about it. "I regret that Danny didn't make it home. I regret that it took bullets to bring the truth out. I regret that there are people in this building right now who are paying for decisions they never made." She paused. "But do I regret surviving? No, because surviving meant I was here today. And today 3 people on this ward are alive because I was in the room." Calloway nodded. "That's a good answer. It's the only answer." He left. She went back to work. One evening, as the ward settled into that quiet hour between medications and memories, Elena paused by the window. The sun was going down. The sky over Washington was burning orange and gold. And somewhere out there, beyond the city, beyond the politics, beyond the classified files and the corrected headstones, the world was turning the way it always turned. Indifferent, beautiful, relentless. She thought of Danny, of Marcus, of the Sangin Valley, of the 3 bullets she'd pulled from a general's chest in a civilian hospital while Navy helicopters shook the roof. She hadn't come home to be celebrated. She hadn't come home to be a symbol or a story or a name on a wall. She'd come home to serve, quietly, steadily, the way Danny would have, the way the best of them always did. And if you've stayed with this story until now, all the way to the end, then you already understand something most people never learn. That the real heroes don't stand on stages. They don't ask for medals. They don't need their names remembered. They just show up. They do the work. And they save the person in front of them. Every single time. So subscribe, not for me, for the stories that don't survive without someone choosing to listen. And comment, never judge, because the person standing next to you in the grocery store, in the hospital, in the waiting room, might be carrying a war you know nothing about, and they might just be the one who saves your life.